Robert and Michelle King, talk us through, was there a particular moment when you both looked at each other and realized this story isn't over and we want to continue telling it once The Good Wife was done?
Yes, in November when Trump was elected. I think before then.
I was going to say, and by the way, of course, we were already going before that.
I mean, before then, we'd had so much fun with a lot of the actors, but Christine Baranski and the team, actually. I'm sorry, Kennedy, the line producer, Scott Free, David Zucker, David Staff. That there was so much joy there. We want to say with them. And then, at least content-wise, things started to gel. I thought there seemed to be a purpose to the show that went beyond Good Wife with this cultural shift that came in last November.
Yeah, I mean, so we knew we loved our characters and we were interested in seeing where they could go. But it wasn't until this new election and suddenly everything seemed very peculiar that the story had a new purpose.
And I know a lot of people talk about Trump fatigue, and it's not really about that. It's about the fact that a lot would change, including the law. You know, just like social media was so much involved with the law, with The Good Wife, a change in the dynamic of the nation and a president that might not have the same attitude towards legal boundaries, the guardrails of the law, so to speak, I think just created a lot of new possibilities.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So the series opens with an episode entitled Inaugurations. Obviously what that means is that it gave us the sense as an audience that you guys weren't going to pull any punches. You really were going to go there in terms of taking a stand either way, because there is a character on the show that is a Trump supporter. Either way, you're going to take a stand, especially now when politics is so in the zeitgeist. So do you think that you're going to ramp that up, given that in the last few months things have just been like relentless in terms of what's been going on at the White House?
You know, it's hard for me to know what's going to be happening politically 3 hours from now. So it's very hard to know what's going to be happening season 2. Just our own impulse is always to embrace the political, but it's really hard to imagine what it might be.
You know, the only thing there's a book out now. I think it's called Strangers in Our Land, which is about the difficult. It was a sociologist from Berkeley who went to live in a Louisiana town where everybody supports Trump, where even to seems like their detriment, because many have been poised by the petrochemical plants here or there, have voted for Trump. And there was an attitude that is also the liberal side of the aisle is through arrogance and elitism causing a lot of the reaction. I think there might be an element of that in the show, because as you know, in the show, The Good Fight, it's a liberal law firm, just as it was with Good Wife, but an African-American law firm. And so I think what's interesting is to show sometimes how the partisanship that is taking over everything is creating these battle lines that are really truly turning into a war. Maybe not a war with violence yet, but a war where emotion, you know, it's like, I'm sorry, Christine Baranski's character with Gary Cole's character. These are two people who disagree or agree on nothing, but there's love that triumphs. And is there any way that love can triumph over all that? So I do think that is the only thing I can imagine pushing more. Yeah, because otherwise you are really diving into the Trump fatigue. I mean, look, yeah, every night you see such good work being done by these late night artists. You can't really beat what they're doing.
No, I mean, they're killing it. But what you just said is so important to us as the audience, because that's exactly what The Good Fight and previously The Good Wife were doing when things were in the zeitgeist, so to speak. So, for example, I don't think there's a show that does technology and the internet, social media and hacking and all the things that encompass that topic better than your show. And I'd really love to know, because that, I mean, and obviously so much of what's going on right now is centered in that realm. So why are those subjects so fascinating to you guys? Because you've been really covering them for many years
now. One of the things is maybe starting with CBS is that when you're doing a show that has a procedural element at all, you really find yourself running up against a hackneyed quality to a lot of
We were not the only procedural on the air.
No.
There's a tendency to, oh, this is The Good Wife where they go to the circus and they're undercover at the circus. We've never done that, but there's a tendency you fall into slots. And it just never felt like people were in shows were talking about what we were talking about, or doing what we were doing. Is everybody you're in a restaurant with was, swiping right. And, there was this, and then, our privacy was being we were so worried about the government with privacy, but what about all these corporations with privacy? So anyway, the bottom line is it was a way to distinguish ourselves through our interest, because our interest is that, because we're on computers all day. I mean, when you're a writer, you're either procrastinating or you're writing, and 90% of the time you're procrastinating. So that means surfing the web, and it's suddenly seeing, oh, there were people who are writing from home or doing work from home, but they were represented by a robot in the workforce that their iPad would be on. And you would look at it and go, that is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. So a lot of it is addressing the stupidity behind it. All these people go on about IT and how smart the world's getting. It's becoming so stupid. So anyway, there's a satirical element to a lot of what we want to do. And it always seemed better to satirize the way Silicon Valley does, the TV show, satirize this sense of how much we're changing the world for the better, when in fact, no, not so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to mention, you've already raised that the show does kind of portray liberal people, and people with money, people with some power and some standing in the community. It's an all-black law firm. It's anti-Trump. Well, it's at least partly anti-Trump. What would you say to people who would criticize the show for taking that stand and being too elitist for them to watch?
Well, more than trying to put forth any kind of message politically, we were trying to be true to the character and the place. It's set in Chicago, which is a notoriously Democratic town, and it's set amongst educated lawyers. So people are going to be smart, and they're probably going to be, many of them, left-leaning. So we were just hoping to be accurate.
Yeah, and I do think, because we're satirizing the liberal mindset, I think we also have a lot of fans on the right. I don't think this is true about The Good Fight yet, but The Good Wife had fans with Rush Limbaugh. He would talk about the show on his radio show, and in a glowing way. I mean, and then we'd have
to have Rush Limbaugh speak well of the show and Michael Moore speak well of the show actually is one of my proudest accomplishments.
So I think part of it was we had a very good character on The Good Wife, Oliver Platt, and we have, I think, what we hope will be an equally good one. Michael Boatman's playing it on The Good Fight, but someone who really is honored as giving a point of view that honors what liberals might consider the opposition, and doesn't come to easy solutions, because I think most of the time you turn on the TV, you see a priest, he's going to molest a child before the hour's up. There's this. And by the way, it's just trying to avoid the liberal cliches that infect TV are just, and now it's just secondhand. Even on good cable shows, there's this anti-God fever to it, just on a writerly level, that's a cliche. One should try to avoid that. But I think it's trying to avoid that makes it fun for non-elites, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
my uncles in the Bay Area, yes, they're happy about it, and they are the opposite of the Democrats.
It's almost like a dream that we get to see all the best parts of The Good Wife, but on a different format, which obviously gives you so many more liberties to take the show in other directions and to kind of push the envelope. This is an obvious question, but how have you enjoyed the transition from network to streaming, where you can do so much more?
I've enjoyed it enormously. It's been a godsend. I mean, first of all, it's really nice to think about fewer episodes. You have more energy to devote. But perhaps even more than that, the fact that we're not constrained by a 42-minute time limit, that episodes can be as long or short as feels creatively correct is wonderful. And then also the fact that there's been a loosening of the language, nudity, that's helpful as well.
And we probably haven't dived into nudity as much as we could have or we haven't. And part of it was you want it to kind of be important to the storytelling. You know, clearly there is a premium cable sense. Oh, let's point out we're premium cable by having a lot of breasts.
Yeah.
And I think we've not wanted to go that direction, but we're doing an episode this coming year that is about nudity clauses and just to explore, to satirize the very thing we just talked about, premium cable tendency to ask a lot of women to strip for them. You know, just the way women are forced to think about their bodies by this sense that somehow is premium. But anyway, they're to be able to be frank about subjects sometimes means being able to use the language. We had an episode this year that was about the alt-right and its use of the internet. And there's no way to do that with Good Wife because it really needed to be able to be frank about the language that is used by the alt-right and its use on the internet. So the same thing would be true with nudity the second year.
But we've been very cognizant of, we had a world that we'd created, and basically this is a similar world. I mean, you see many of the same characters. So they're not going to be cursing as though they were on the docks, and they're not going to be running around, you know, topless, because those aren't the people we created. So the hope is that it lives within the same reality. It just allows us to see what we couldn't see on CBS, but you imagine you would have if you hadn't had the constraints.
Yeah, I think it would be awfully jarring to have Christine Baranski swearing like a construction worker whilst having no clothes on. So we do need to have some transition. I should
We save that for the Christmas party.
Please. You know, I've spoken to so many people from The Good Wife and now The Good Fight, and many of them mentioned that the 22 episode season was quite grueling. It was a very difficult thing to do, and in fact, CBS would often use that in their advertising to Emmy voters about how difficult it was for you guys to do that show. I'm wondering now that you're in the streaming world, do you think the 22 episode season is eventually going to become extinct on TV?
If it does, it's because of the actors. It will be because actors at the end of the day just say it's too much to ask of us. So some of them are already refusing or preferring not to, or asking for shorter seasons. So my guess is they're going to be the ones that make it happen or not.
I think the difficulty is it's hard to do good work in that many episodes, just because of the stress and strain on the company and the ability to keep that level up. I mean, I think we had two, what I would consider excellent years on Good Wife, where, you know, one was a 23 episode year. That was the second season, and the fifth season, which was 22. And I think that came about because there was a passion that I think exceeded, that was able to be kept fueled through all 22, partly because we knew we were heading toward plot points that were pretty good and very solid. I think otherwise, I think it's very hard. I don't know, I don't want to say never, but it's going to be very hard for network shows to keep a voice going over 22 episodes. That's another problem, is to have one voice, which I think you react to when you watch a movie or a TV show or a play. If you can feel the voice in it, Leftovers, Handmaid's Tale, those are ones with voices that you react to that. It's very difficult to find that often, you know, with network.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet you guys managed to do very well with the Emmys. The show was nominated for Drama Series for its first 2 years. It won an acting Emmy almost every single season. A lot of the guest actors won, Juliana and Archie and so forth. You had episodes like Hitting the Fan. Like there's a lot of really good stuff that we can take from that show. But the one thing that I love about the awards history is that you guys are nominated for the pilot and for the finale. I thought it was really cool for your writing. I'm wondering what was sweeter, the first breakthrough Emmy nomination or the seal of approval at the end?
First. I mean, because we we had come off the right. I'm sorry, that's my opinion.
And I would have said the last. So that's perfect.
Wonderful. All right, there you go.
Okay, so the first, because we came off the writer's strike and we thought our career was over, that felt very gratifying. Because there were so many turns about the Emmys being like not geared towards quality, but being geared towards what people happened to see that year or whatever the buzz was about. It felt like it was declining in our estimation. But the first one I thought was a real boost. Sorry, now you're.
And I would say the last, because we spent so much time thinking about that finale and trying to figure out which way to go. And the fact that some folks liked it was terribly gratifying to me.
We don't even need you. We're just going to interview each other here.
I love it. I love it. I'll just walk away. Yeah, I couldn't imagine which one I'd love more. It'd be a Sophie's Choice, because the seal of approval at the end was pretty cool, because by that time, network shows it's very hard for them to be nominated at the Emmys these days. The cable and streaming is really, really dominating, and yet you were able to squeeze in with that nomination, which showed that the voters weren't prepared to let the show go. A lot of the success of The Good Wife was due as well to the actors. You brought on so many great guest actors. You've done the same thing for The Good Fight. What feedback do you get from people that you bring onto the show, or actors, sorry, that you bring onto the show? And what's the secret to good casting?
First of all, the best feedback we've gotten is that people want to return. So that's the nicest feedback. In terms of why they're coming in the first place, much of that has to do with our casting director, Mark Sachs, who's wonderful and was on The Good Wife as well. Brooke Kennedy, who's our partner, another executive producer, helps run a very welcoming set that tries to work around folks' theater schedules.
And I would say the third is number one on the call sheet. And when it was Juliana Margulies and now Christine Baranski, they create very much the only thing I can imagine is kind of like an actor's workshop almost, where there's a real attention. Everybody come in knowing their lines. Everybody come in to do their best work and kind of have fun and experiment. I think we have directors that know that the bread that is buttered is all on the acting side and allow the actors to explore it. And then I think Michelle and I only help that, and the writers' room help that, in that we really do watch the dailies and rewrite for actors, especially upon their returns. So, I mean, Jane Lynch, I think, is one of the breakthroughs this year. I thought she created this amazing character that now we know where we want to go with her. Now that we saw what she did with it, what we kind of added in, the birds hitting the windows and things like that, that stuff kind of comes together and you find what you want to do next time they're around.
Yeah.
I would expect by now that the production would be something like a well-oiled machine. You've been doing it for a long time. You have a network behind you, which is, behind the streaming service. But there must be challenges. What would you say was the most difficult challenge for season 1 of The Good Fight?
I would say the most difficult challenge is the most difficult challenge of every season of every show we've ever done, and that's money and time. You never have enough of either.
We're on a lot of panels when we were doing Good Wife with people who were doing 10 episodes a season or whatever, and we'd always leave saying, fuck you, because we would have to go back and go write and shoot episode 21, and they were on vacation. And now that we're doing it, it's like, no, there are problems. One of them is the constriction on budgets is tighter because you're not amortizing the money over a longer season. So you're kind of held, you find you're kind of held in a little bit more an elbow room. And the other is, I do find that there's a little less chance to experiment in the same way because of the need to hit the serialized stories. With 22 a year, we would do an episode that was all in Juliana's mind. And here, this last season on The Good Fight, or this first season, we wanted to do one where we had no dialogue in it at all, but we realized that if we did that, we would be putting a pin in the serialized story. And if you're only doing 10, it kind of trapped you a little bit. So I would say that that's the biggest problem with stream. The other thing is obviously we were not supposed to be the first one up with All Access. It was supposed to be Star Trek. So I do think, I don't know what the audience was, but all I knew is there were a lot of people who wanted to see it because they were fans of The Good Wife and didn't either know how or were trying to figure out or didn't want to pay money or whatever. So I do think you want to be part of the conversation, and sometimes it felt like we were sort of part of the conversation, but also like people, we did an episode that was kind of playing off of the NBC episode that wasn't shown on Law and Order. And part of that is to try to break through and become part and try to get a second chance to get people to come on board and say, oh, I have to watch out because they're going to say something mean and mean-spirited or whatever. So you're always trying to look for ways that you can break through. What is that called? Noisy, I guess. Be a noisy.
Exactly, because there is a lot of noise. So thinking back to the show's predecessor, can you pinpoint a particular highlight from working on The Good Wife that you will take with you, for the rest of your life? Or was there something in particular that you thought, yeah, that was special?
Yeah, I mean, directing the last episode of the second season, there was we were in the hotel that had it was a scene where Juliana's character and Josh's character were supposed to be going up to a hotel room to have sex. Amazing. And all we knew is we didn't want it to be one of those, moments where actors go, they kiss, and then bam, they bam through a door, and they're tearing at each other's clothes. We wanted that kind of difficulty that it takes to get to what did Walker Percy call it? The malaise. The malaise of life and how it prevents you from doing those banging. We don't live in a world where we can jump cut and banging through the door. So that was it. And we were at this location that was a disaster. We couldn't close down traffic to the elevators. So people kind of kept flowing through our scene and it was just a mess. So we cut it short and then we built an elevator set on our set late at night. We started at 11 o'clock at night and just kind of made up something of, a little girl who actually was our daughter who played the part, hitting all the elevator buttons, and that stopped at all the floors. And then in post-production, we put in these fake doors. Anyway, it's one of my favorite parts because it was not in the script. It was just something that was coming about because we had a bad location. And I thought it told the story better than it was told the story we wanted to tell. So I thought that was a highlight. And also, it was late at night. It was like almost doing a student film because we had no script. It was just like, let's go off script and do this. So anyway, that was.
I don't know if you remember, we pulled our kid out of a sick bed to come down to the set 1 in the morning to film that. Yeah.
Yes.
Parent of the Year award.
Yes. Did you have a favorite moment?
There were a lot of wonderful moments. It was a great cast and a great crew. So just getting to know them over all those years. I mean, there were births, there were deaths, there were marriages. It was a life there. It was filled with it.
Yeah. Robert, you were talking about closing arguments in case anyone wants to go into it.
Oh, there you go. Yes.
So, probably one of the best episodes of the season and of any show. And hitting the fan when Josh Charles sweeps all the
oh
my God, really? That's amazing. Anyway, we could talk about that all day, but I've always wanted to ask that question, so now I have. And I want to know this. So there was a lot of Emmy success from the show, especially with its actors. The Good Wife was the last network show nominated for Best Drama Series. It was a while ago now. It was the first 2 seasons. I think it was also nominated with maybe one other show from network, but it was pretty much the last network show. Take us back to the time when you were nominated in that big, very high-profile category and what it felt like to be told, yeah, your show is nominated for Best Drama Series.
We would find out. We were in Los Angeles, so it was very early in the morning that typically we would find out. And when we got to work, we had champagne and orange juice with the writers, and that lasted a few minutes, and then we dove right back in because, if you have to do a lot of episodes,
you have no time.
I think it was a big surprise to that because, I don't know if we knew what to expect. I don't think it was as big of a category now then, was it? Was it 5 shows instead of
5 or 6? Yeah.
And I think it was a very surprising because I think the last show was Lost before us, and just it kind of felt like it would be discounted because there was a procedural element and because of CBS. Do you know what I mean? In other words, even though in our opinion it did it well, there was a sense that you could dismiss it because it was falling into one of those disparaged categories. Anyway, so I think it was a real surprise, and it was I think that made it very sweet. And the second year, I think that maybe the nomination for the second year was sweeter because it was like there always is talk at that point about sophomore slumps, especially with 22 a year shows. And we were really intent on doing it better that year, and to get that kind of pat on the back was a good thing.
Yeah, it was very exciting. So are we ever going to see the Florix again, or is that somewhere that you don't want to go yet for this new show?
Not to Juliana. I mean, the only problem I have with putting, sorry, what did you want? I think I'm going to say the same that you would say.
Yeah, I mean, we've got such wonderful characters now and such a full cast and a full world that it feels most appropriate to follow them and focus on them.
The difficulty is if you put her in any part in the world, that would be the end to the Good Wife story, not the end, not the actual end. There would be this asterisk hanging out there, and I think that would be the reason not. But we'd love to, get some of the other floors. I mean, there's Chris Noth. But anyway, there's other ways to play that story out and not feel like you were denigrating the main story.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, has nothing to do with how we feel about Juliana. I mean, we adore Juliana. We just saw her a couple weeks ago. I mean, we're still great pals.
And she's of the same opinion.
Yeah, no, and this is very much her point of view.
Yeah, that's really important, I guess. So we'll just have to wait and see. Maybe in season 7 or something, when you're still going at 10 episodes a year. As Emmy watchers, like I am, and many of us at Gold Derby, you'll notice one of the prevailing argument, we say it every year, is that Christine Baranski is so overdue for her second Emmy. She was nominated almost every single season except for the last one, and unfortunately was pipped at the post every time. So hopefully she'll be nominated for The Good Fight. But if she doesn't win again, was it possible that you could write for her something where she's throwing stuff across the room, or she murders someone, or something really, really big? Is that a possibility?
Yes, it is absolutely a possibility.
Okay.
When Juliana didn't win the first season of Good Wife, we said we had to write a role, because I believe it was the closer. I believe,
yeah,
right? And it was I thought it was a scene where either she was raped or, I mean, in other words, there was a lot of tears and there was a lot of, yeah. So what we thought, and I think you guys nailed it, which you thought maybe the wrong episode was submitted from Jules or whatever.
Yes.
What we thought the second season we would do is have an episode that was like, okay, this is the calling card. And it was an episode where they break up, where she kicks him out. And, there's all the tears that you would want. And obviously Juliana can do, I always like her more for comedy than for, the tearing, crying stuff. But it was one of those episodes that was like, okay, that has to. So if Christine Baranski isn't nominated or doesn't win, yeah, we'll have some massive breakdown.
She'll break up with Josh Charles.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. He's got to come back from the dead. She has to go to her knees screaming in agony. Something to that effect would be wonderful. Well, so what's the timeline now for season 2? Have you started working on it yet? And what can we expect?
The working on it is just in our kitchen. The writers don't get together until the end of August.
We start shooting in mid-October, which is the same thing with the first year of Good Fight. And I believe, although who knows with All Access and with Star Trek and blah, 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 but I think we're still thinking like a release in February. And that it's 13 episodes instead of 10. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so
good. So good to have this break. We haven't had this kind of break since 2009.
I can't imagine how good it is. And I'm thinking that maybe, you know, the season 2 first episode might start with an I. It could be impeachment. Who knows? It could be anything like along those lines. We'll see.
Anything feels possible now.
Anything is possible. We'll see what happens. Robert and Michelle, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for The Good Wife, and now for The Good Fight, and good luck at the Emmys this year.
And good, thank you for doing such a good job on your show. It's great. And